There is a particular kind of exhaustion that lives in the bones of those who learned to be strong before they learned to be soft. It doesn't announce itself with tears or breakdowns. It hides behind competence, behind the ability to function flawlessly, while something inside quietly collapses. You see it in the person who never asks for help, who holds everyone else together, while their own foundation crumbles in silence. Strength, when forced upon a child, becomes something different than resilience. It becomes survival dressed as virtue. Somewhere in those early years, perhaps when a parent fell apart or a sibling needed protecting, the child made a decision without words. They decided that someone had to stay standing, and if no one else would, it had to be them. Psychology calls this parentification, when a child assumes adult emotional responsibilities before their nervous system is ready to hold them. The brain of a young child is designed to absorb safety, not provide it. When that order reverses, something fundamental shifts. The child learns to scan faces for distress before they learn to name their own feelings. They learn to soothe others before they discover what their own comfort feels like. Neuroscience shows that chronic stress in childhood literally reshapes the developing brain, particularly in regions governing emotional regulation and threat detection. The amygdala, responsible for processing fear, becomes hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex, which manages rational thought, struggles to fully develop its capacity for self-care. What emerges is a person who can hold space for everyone except themselves. They become extraordinarily attuned to the emotional weather of every room they enter. They notice the slight change in someone's voice, the tension behind a smile, the worry hiding in silence. This isn't a superpower. It's hypervigilance wearing the mask of empathy. The nervous system never learned to rest because rest once meant danger. If this perspective resonates, you can support the video by liking it. There is a peculiar loneliness in being strong too early. While other children were allowed to be messy, uncertain, and dependent, you were learning to be the opposite. You became the reliable one, the one who never complained, the one people leaned on without asking if your shoulders could bear the weight. Attachment theory suggests that children need consistent emotional support to develop secure bonds. When that support is absent or inconsistent, they learn to self-soothe in isolation. They become what psychologists call dismissive avoidant, not because they don't need connection, but because needing felt dangerous. The cost reveals itself in adulthood. You might find yourself unable to ask for help even when drowning. The words catch in your throat because some part of you still believes that needing makes you a burden. You've spent so long being the strong one that vulnerability feels like failure. You mistake independence for strength, not realizing that true strength includes the capacity to be held. Relationships become complicated. You attract people who need saving because that dynamic feels familiar. You know how to be needed. You don't know how to be wanted just for existing. When someone offers care without you earning it, your body tenses. The nervous system whispers that this is a trick, that love without labor cannot be trusted. Comment early if this describes your experience. There is also the exhaustion that no one sees. You function beautifully on the surface, managing work and obligations with apparent ease. But inside, you are constantly running on fumes, performing strength while your reserves have long been depleted. Research on childhood emotional neglect shows that adults who were forced into early maturity often experience chronic fatigue, anxiety, and a persistent sense of emptiness. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. You might notice that rest feels impossible. Even in stillness, your mind races, searching for the next problem to solve, the next person to support, the next crisis to manage. This is the legacy of a childhood where vigilance meant survival. The parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest and recovery, never learned to fully activate. You exist in a state of perpetual readiness, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The heartbreak is realizing that the strength you were praised for was never supposed to be yours to carry. Children are meant to be protected, not protectors. They are meant to learn boundaries by having them modeled, not by becoming the boundary between chaos and stability. Type YES if this helped you understand something about yourself. There is a quiet grief in recognizing what was taken. You grieve the childhood you didn't get to have, the softness you never knew, the permission to fall apart that was never granted. This grief doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like anger at how effortlessly others seem to ask for help. Sometimes it looks like envy toward those who were allowed to be fragile. But beneath the grief lives something else. The same sensitivity that made you hypervigilant also made you deeply compassionate. You understand pain in a way that cannot be taught. You hold space for others because you know what it feels like to have no space held for you. This is not to romanticize what happened. The wound should never have occurred. But the wound, when acknowledged, can become a doorway to profound empathy. Healing begins not with becoming softer, but with recognizing that you were always soft underneath the armor. The strength was real, but it was never meant to be permanent. Trauma-informed therapy often focuses on reparenting, teaching adults to give themselves what they needed as children. This means learning to speak kindly to yourself when you falter, to rest without guilt, to ask for help without shame. It means dismantling the belief that your worth is measured by how much you can endure alone. If someone you know might benefit from this, feel free to share it. You begin to notice the voice inside that says you must always be strong. You start to question it. Where did it come from? Was it ever truly yours, or was it borrowed from a moment when survival demanded it? Slowly, you practice softness. You let someone else carry something. You admit when you are tired. The world does not collapse. In fact, something shifts. The people who truly matter do not leave when you stop performing strength. There is a particular freedom that comes from no longer being the person who holds everything together. You discover that you are allowed to be held. You learn that needing is not weakness, but humanity. The nervous system, after years of guarding, begins to soften. Rest becomes possible. If this gave you clarity, comment strong below. The person who learned to be strong too early carries an invisible history. They walk through life with a competence that hides an ache, but within that ache is also a profound capacity for transformation. Because once you recognize that the strength was never supposed to be forced, you can choose a different kind of strength, the kind that includes tenderness, the kind that allows rest, the kind that knows being human means sometimes falling apart and trusting that you will be caught. You were never meant to carry the world alone. And the moment you set it down, even for a breath, you remember what it feels like to simply exist without the weight. That is not weakness. That is coming home to yourself. If this resonated, show your support by liking the video. What moment made you realize you had to be strong too early? Subscribe to explore more about the hidden patterns that shape who we are.